British fighters such as Leon Edwards, Tom Aspinall, Michael Bisping, Paddy Pimblett, Darren Till and many more have become mainstay of the UFC world stage. But this all started with one man, Ian the Machine Freeman. Ian Freeman was born on September 8, 1966 in Sunderland, England. He would go on to become one of the most important pioneers of British mixed martial arts. At a time when MMA was still a fringe sport, barely understood in the United Kingdom, Freeman stepped into the cage and helped put British fighters on the global map. Ian Freeman was the first ever British fighter to be taken onto a UFC card. Before MMA became his focus, Freeman came from a background in traditional martial arts and combat sports. He trained in judo, boxing, and other disciplines, building a reputation as a physically powerful, aggressive fighter. His thick build and relentless pressure earned him the nickname The Machine, a name that would follow him throughout his career. Freeman began fighting professionally in the late 1990s, competing in various European promotions. In those early days, the sport had fewer rules, fewer weight classes, and far less structure than it does today. Fighters were expected to be tough, adaptable, and willing to face opponents from completely different disciplines. Freeman thrived in that environment. His breakthrough moment came in the Ultimate Fighting Championship. At UFC 38, Frank Mir became the first British fighter to enter the UFC cage. It was held at the Royal Albert Hall in London, and Freeman faced off against American heavyweight named Frank Mir. At the time, Mir was an undefeated prospect, highly regarded for his Brazilian jiu-jitsu skills and technical ability. Freeman, however, had other ideas. He took the fight to the ground and unleashed a barrage of strikes, overwhelming Mir with raw strength and relentless pressure. The referee eventually stopped the contest, giving Freeman a technical knockout victory. It was a shock result to many fans, and it marked one of the first major wins by a British fighter in the modern UFC era. That victory made Freeman a national figure within the British MMA scene. At the time when few UK fighters were recognised internationally, he proved that a British heavyweight could compete with and defeat top American talent inside the world's biggest promotion. Freeman continued to compete across different organisations, including Cage Rage and Pride Fighting Championships. He faced a range of opponents, from experienced veterans to rising prospects, and became known for his durability and willingness to fight anyone. Over the course of his professional career, he compiled a record of 20 wins, 7 losses, and 1 draw. Among his notable victories were wins over Frank Mir and former UFC heavyweight champion Rico Rodriguez. These wins reinforced his reputation as a dangerous and respected heavyweight during the early years of modern MMA. Freeman's fighting style reflected the era he came from. He wasn't a specialist in a single discipline. Instead, he was a rugged, all-round combatant who relied on physical strength, pressure, and determination. He was known for closing the distance, taking opponents down, and wearing them down with ground and pound. It was a simple but brutal, effective approach, especially in the heavyweight division. As the sport evolved, becoming more technical and more globally competitive, Freeman eventually stepped away from regular competition. His later years in the cage included appearances in European promotions, but his most important legacy had already been secured. He was one of the first British fighters to gain international recognition in the UFC, and his win over Frank Mir is still remembered as a milestone moment for UK MMA. Outside the cage, Freeman took on new roles. He worked as a paramedic, choosing a profession dedicated to helping people in crisis. It was a striking contrast to his fighting career, but it reflected another side of his character. He also became involved in coaching and commentary, helping to support the growth of MMA in the United Kingdom. Freeman's influence can be seen in the generations that followed. Fighters such as Michael Bisping, Dan Hardy, and later British champions built their careers in a landscape that pioneers like Freeman helped to create. When he entered for UFC, British MMA barely had a presence. Today, the UK is one of the sport's strongest markets, with major events, world champions, and deep talent pool. Ian the Machine Freeman may not have held a UFC title, but he was the first, and his impact on the sport in Britain is undeniable. He was the first to step onto the world stage in UFC, and one of the first in MMA overall. One of the first to win at that level, and the man who proved that British fighters belonged in the cage with the best in the world. His career represents the tough, uncertain, and pioneering days of early MMA, when fighters relied on grit as much as they did skill, and when every victory helped build the sport's future. If you'd like to hear us talk about more areas of martial arts, culture, and far more, please do like, comment, and subscribe, and thank you for watching.